Welcome to episode 375 of Sutton Impact Family Style. We were just talking about screwing up the intro, and I screwed up the intro, but I'm going to leave this in because it's fun. I'm Jason, and I'm joined by.
Fred. And I'm Keaton.
I was thinking, and I probably should have told you guys this when we just did our pre show meeting, but you know, if you can get good news or bad news, most people take the bad news first.
Yeah.
Let's talk about teams that had bad news in free agency and the draft, and we can start with, I think, the Milwaukee Bucks, who did nothing and can't do anything based on the cap and their draft pick status. So they are kind of stuck with the people they brought to the dance at this point. And when you look at the East, and we'll get into the good news teams, but like just mentioning the good news teams, Philadelphia got better, Orlando got better, the Knicks got better, Boston is still a beast. Cleveland is, a new coach, maybe, Darius Garland, back from real healthy this year. Like, I'd be worried if I was the Bucks, and I don't know what I would do if I was them. That's one of my bad news teams.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. They are stuck, and if you're in Milwaukee, you have nothing but a negative outlook on next year because there was nothing that happened this year other than the fact that you can maybe hang your hat on, well, we could have been more competitive if we didn't have some injuries at the end.
Yeah.
But that team was flawed and broken, and I love Doc, but he didn't certainly bring a different energy or outlook on that team. It just seems like it's not a fit for whatever reason. Giannis and Dame just don't seem to be able to create a team that's going to be fighting for a championship. And I think your point, you look at those other teams and how are they going to compete? Those guys, the Heat, in the East, those are two teams that have been perennial competitors that I definitely would be putting them on the downtrend right now.
Yeah, and then they've had their third coach in 3 seasons, and his big offseason explanation was, well, Dame knew he was going to get traded, so he didn't want to work out and get hurt, so he came into the season sloppy. Like, if that's, and your hope is that he doesn't this year and that somehow changes you, that team scares me. I really like Giannis and I like the Bucks. I just don't know where they're going to be in the pecking order. I would think pretty low.
Yeah, I'm with you, Jay. And unfortunately, I think they have to be banking on the big bounce back year from Dame. Obviously, he did have a pretty crazy offseason. I know he got divorced and he got traded for moved franchises for the first time, but he wasn't great. And he's expected to be top 12, 10, 8 offensive player.
Yeah.
And him and Giannis is supposed to be. I mean, how do you win championships? You win it with stars. They're supposed to be competing for championships, but without him, they can't do much. And they're waiting a little bit too long in free agency here to really add guys that are going to fit well with those dudes. I think that you look at some of the guys available, some of the dudes like DeRozan or Levine from the Bulls. Those guys don't fit with Milwaukee.
No. And Milwaukee's not a team that's going to be paying.
He would fit on anybody's team, but he would have fit great there.
Yeah.
Give Lopez some minutes, give them some inside force, which they surprisingly lacked a lot last year. But they're a head scratcher. I like their pieces. I mean, I still think Middleton can contribute. I still think Lopez can contribute, just not. You can't ask those guys to play 40 minutes a night. But
both guys over 35.
Tough spot. The East is getting tough.
Yeah. And then my bad news West team, we might have different ones on this, but I was probably going to go with the Clippers. I don't hate their new logo like a lot of people seem to hate their new logo. I get the confusion because it is a little, it takes you a minute to realize what you're looking at. But I kind of like it in a weird way. But I mean, you lost Paul George. You have Kawhi and James Harden with the player option after this year, which he's probably going to opt into because I don't think he's going to try very hard this year. And he's going to be very desirable next year. You're in the new building. You're still second fiddle to the Lakers, and your team just got worse. And everybody in the West seemingly got better. So there's a couple bad news teams in the West, but I feel like the Clippers would be my bad news team.
And you're right. There's a couple different options, right? Like you got the Clippers that you mentioned. You got the Nuggets.
Yeah.
Who couple key pieces and are in the same boat as Milwaukee in terms of like not really having any flexibility to do anything. Um, I would say there's a little bit more optimism with the Nuggets than there is in Milwaukee for me.
Yeah.
Just because I think some of the younger guys might be able to fill some of the void in Denver. But honestly, I think, and this call me crazy, I think the bad luck team in the West is the Lakers.
Okay.
Personally,
But they have JJ
I
Redick.
think that situation that they went through draft wise, not to get ahead of ourselves, but like draft wise, like I think that put them back on top of the challenges that they have. What's his name? D'Angelo Russell opted into his contract, like put them in a really bad spot financially. Like they're gonna have to make some tough decisions. But now, like the culture piece is really, really gonna be a mess. I think the Lakers are in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, and they were in that weird spot where like you have LeBron and AD. You won a chip 2 years ago. LeBron has said after he opted out he would take less money, which is not something stars are supposed to do, in order to bring in somebody. DeRozan is pretty much the only other name out there because I know a lot of people are talking about what a good fit Laurie Marketing will be, but I have a hard time believing the Lakers have enough to get Laurie Marketing, considering all the teams that want Laurie Marketing. Like I don't think the Lakers offer would be the offer you'd want. You know, D'Angelo Russell, what Rui Hachimura, and the 29 and 28 first round picks from the Lakers. Like I don't think that's going to get it done.
No, and I could see marketing, like you said, Jay, just fitting on a lot of other teams. I could see him fitting on a team like the Warriors a lot with Steph. But back to the bad news teams, it's hard to see a positive path for the Clippers. They're in that weird spot because they have to stay competitive. Their owner wants to stay competitive for the new stadium opening, and so it just feels like that's why they're not blowing it up. But they're in such classic blow it up stage. It's tough too when you're the second fiddle in your own city.
Yeah.
And the only way they're ever going to get out of that is by winning a championship, or probably, honestly, winning like 3 in a row. And you're not going to do that with Kawhi, unfortunately, at this stage. And the guys they've added, you look at, I mean, Derek Jones was really effective for the Mavericks this year.
Yeah, he was
But
very nice.
He's getting up there in age. You re-sign Harden. You bring Batum back, who, I think the NBA seems to like Batum more than the fans do, but he's effective. And then they bring in Kevin Porter, who's, I don't know if he's really the locker room guy you're looking to add to
I don't think so.
that mess. But
Yeah.
It's just an interesting group of players behind Kawhi now with no Paul George. Is Harden really the second best player you want on a competitive team, especially in the West? I don't know. So the Clippers, for me, too, are kind of a bad news team right now for sure.
All right. Well,
Jay, you mentioned just the last thing you mentioned too, like Marketing going to the Lakers. The other reason why I have a hard time believing that would happen is because even though Ainge left the Celtics and went to Utah, he's still a Celtic, still hates the Lakers. He's not going to help them get better.
no, and like I said, there's other teams out there that just have literal war chests, and the Lakers basically have 2 first-round picks, D'Angelo's contract, and then does anybody really? I mean, nothing against Austin Reeves. I think he's a very nice player, but I don't think he's the type of young, talented player you would get back in that trade that you'd be excited about. But we've had enough bummer news. We'll just go in a little round table and talk about the teams we feel most excited about. And I'll begin with the New York Knicks, who they've added Mikal Bridges. They did lose Hartenstein, which is a real bummer. But now they have almost the entire championship Villanova team. And I absolutely love them, and I can't wait to watch them all season.
Yeah, that's a tough one to argue with. I will say it is going to be interesting though because Tibbs is a tough coach to like.
He is.
And I think that those 4 Villanova guys won't mind at all being coached up and coached hard by him. Like that seems like it's in their DNA. I like all 4 guys because they have like a real grit about them. But that New York media is tough, and if that team underperforms, it is going to take it in the drop of a hat. The New York media is going to be like breaking down the door for Jay Wright to be the coach of that team, just to kind of make that come full circle.
Yeah, I would
So
love that anyway because I feel like
there's
Tibbs is, he does have a shelf life as far as what he does to his players, but it's hard to imagine that team not overachieving in the regular season. Now I don't know what will happen in the postseason, so we'll get to some of the other teams we're excited about, but I can't imagine them not being like a top 2 or 3 team in the East in the regular season because I think they're going to play way harder than they probably should. And that sounds silly because we want them to play hard, but you know the way Tibbs coaches and the way that team plays, I think there's going to be a whirling dervish of a team all season.
Yeah, and I think they're just building off of a great year last year. They completely overachieved, and they felt great. I think it was cool being a Celtics fan, and I think just anybody not even being a New York fan, it's almost kind of cool just as an NBA fan to see the Knicks like have their mojo back
Yeah.
and be a team that you can see that the city likes to root for. Especially, I mean, a guy like Brunson is awesome, and then the team. I mean, his college buddies around him, and they're winning. How can you not like that? I think Anunoby is a great fit for that team too. He just fits the New York. I think he's from New York, but he just fits the Tibbs style. But I wonder. I'm very interested to see what ends up happening with Randall, because I don't think he really is going to like the idea of coming back and being a third option, especially the fact that he's not college buddies with those guys. He wants to be an alpha, and are they gonna force him to play center, I guess?
He and Mitchell Robinson. Yeah, I think I think they're going to play a lot of small ball. Because I think I mean they've got guys that can probably play the 5 when they need them defensively. Even when Mitchell Robinson will inevitably be hurt at different points. But yeah, I have a lot of faith in them. I'm very excited for the Knicks.
Yeah, I think. What do you think? Got to be conference finals with a goal for them, if not finals.
I mean, I think if you're a Knicks fan, you're already thinking finals. So, but I mean, I think probably most of the teams we're going to talk about in this segment are all going to be teams that it's probably conference finals or bust, but teams that we all think, with a few exceptions, I feel like everybody thinks they're going to be a championship contender, right? Because what's the other point? I mean, all these teams I think we're excited about. Like, I don't know who you're going to bring up next, but I assume they're all finals contenders, I would say.
Yeah, I think you're right on. For me, I would say a team. I hate to admit, but I have been really impressed with what the Mavericks have done, even just in a few days of free agency. I think building off of their offseason last year, Lively was a really risky pick, and he's already proven to be a hit.
Yeah.
If he can just stay out of foul trouble, that guy's going to be a long-time NBA starter for how athletic he is as a big. And he fits what they want to do, pick and roll wise, catch some lobs. I love the Klay Thompson ad. I mean, I think he's perfect for what they want to do. He's just an incredible shooter.
Yeah.
Not asking him to do too much, and he gets to stay on a competitive team. I think if he went to a team that wasn't a competitor, then I could see his career, like him retiring after next year or something. But I could see him being fired up that he's now out of Golden State. But them adding like Najee Marshall is, I think, a super underrated ad.
Oh, right.
From the Pelicans, because another guy that's just going to be he's a lot like PJ Washington.
Yeah, he is.
Super physical outside shooter, but can body a guy up. He's the type of guy that would have been a great matchup for the Celtics. So I think that the Mavericks are just stocking up to come back again as a higher seed this year or next year.
Yeah, I mean, there's been quite a few moves, and I like OKC and Hartenstein. It boggles my mind how you're paying him almost $30 million a year, and the Wizards got Valanciunas for $10 million a year.
Yeah.
I don't understand that math, nor do I understand why anybody would sign with Washington as a free agent. Like, that all boggles my mind. But I do think the team that stands out for a lot of reasons, but also because it's going to finally bring this story to an end, is the 76ers. One way or another, we're going to reach the end of this whole process thing that had been going on for 12 years, right? Because there's no reason why that team isn't competing for at least the conference finals with adding Paul George, with squaring away Maxey, and putting the pieces around Embiid to say, like, okay, it needs to be done now. We got the coach that we need, we got the right attitude, and now it's all boiling down to whether or not Embiid is healthy enough to get through the playoffs.
That's why the Drummond signing for them was nice too.
Yeah, to give him a couple extra minutes. I do like Paul Reed. Like, I thought that he was decent for them as that backup. When he had to step in, he did a pretty good job. So I think he's staying on. So, I mean, those three big guys to, like, share some load and maybe to, give Embiid a couple games where, hey, listen, we only need you for 15 minutes this game, and we can get through the rest of it. I think that those kind of moves are going to be essential for the season to get him through to the playoffs. But whether they get to the conference finals, which I personally think if you're competing for a conference, if you're getting to the conference finals, competing to get to the championship game, I think you have a successful team. I know
think
that,
so. Yeah.
Today's day and age, everything's about, just getting the chip. Celtics would have been getting torn up if they lost in the finals or even in the conference finals, right?
Right.
People would not have been like, it's a good team. You got to break up the duo. You get to a Final Four in any professional league or any, I feel like you have a successful team. So if they can't get to that point, then it's time to just find a different big guy. My personal opinion.
Well, he's never been to the conference finals.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Like, so this year is like you get to the conference finals, or we're blowing this up. One way or the other, it's the end of the process. The end of the process, because either you finally got to your destination, check, or we're done and we're moving on to whatever chapter 2.
Well, yeah, and I think the reality is he's not going to be 100% when you get to the postseason. You can, now that you have Paul George and they're going to have a really full roster, you can try to coast through the regular season and sit him as much as you can, quote unquote, have him be injured. But he's not. There's no way nobody's ever 100% when you get to the postseason. And I just think him getting through 4 rounds is going to be so tough. But that's why you bring in Paul George. I really like the Drummond signing, like Jay said, but also they brought in, or they re-signed Oubre.
Yeah.
Who I think is an underrated guy, because you're not going to be asking Paul George to cover the other team's best wing, and you're not going to have to ask him to now, because you're going to be able to stick a guy like Oubre on there who's he's the type of defender you think of. The Celtics aren't winning without Drew Holiday. Think about, you go through a lot of the recent champions. I think that you have to have one of those wing defenders, and I just think a guy like Oubre, it could be nothing, but it could also turn out that in the finals he ends up being a huge part of it, because he's locking down somebody, I don't know, like covering like a guy like Luka.
That's a great call, though, because like what we saw, the Celtics' success was predicated on the fact that you had multiple guys that could defend multiple positions, right? So all this notion, all this work and setting things up for switch here and switch there to get to the guy you want to get to, when you have 2 or 3 defenders that are okay guarding, multiple positions, you can work through those switches and get back to where you want to be, to not necessarily get your weaknesses really exposed. So that's a really good point, because I'm one of those people that would have underrated it, because I didn't even pick up on that.
Well, and to build off of what you said, I mean, they have to, versatility is so important nowadays. I don't think any team that's built to beat another team will ever win a championship, because we see that year in, year out. The Timberwolves this year were completely built to beat the Nuggets. They go do that, but then they were better, I think, than the Mavericks. But the Mavericks ended up beating them because the Timberwolves didn't have a way to beat that team. They weren't able to adapt to it.
Right.
The Celtics finally got over the hump because they were able to beat a bunch of different types of teams. And I think that a guy like Oubre, again, maybe it's nothing, but he's the type of guy that allows you to play a smaller lineup, play a bigger lineup, have a guy that can be a defender, defend different positions, shoot from the outside. I just think that they're adding great pieces, to add on to max he's signing, he's now a superstar. And Paul George, that team could be really good.
Yeah. Well, I guess let's do 2 rounds. I was going to go OKC here, but I'm actually going to go with Boston. They just won the chip. They re-signed Tatum, re-signed White. Holiday's under contract. Brown is paid. They still have a nice deep bench, and the monkey's off their back. I still like their offseason. They even like the guy they got late in the draft. And all the versatility, everything we have, they have it, and they're just now entering their primes as most of their players. So it's a short one, but I like Boston didn't really lose anything on the team that won the championship and has been in contention for pretty much the entire Tatum Brown, and now everybody's paid and fat and happy. So
Yeah,
I like
and,
it.
and there's a lot of critics who are always like, "Hey, listen, if you stop getting better, then you're getting past." But I agree with you. I think that what they did in terms of like shoring up the team, like Stevens was smart in terms of like the extensions that he got out there. Obviously, there's a ton of money that is floating around, like with Derek White just signing for $30 million a year, with Tatum just signing for $60+ million a year. You're thinking like, where the hell are they getting all this money? I mean, they're going to be in cap hell. They're all extensions, right? So they're not necessarily hitting this year. So I agree. I think that the two guys that they have, even Shireman, like put up some crazy number in college that like no other guys would put up, which I didn't realize. But as a 6'6" guard who can shoot, like I think he could get some minutes. And I do like Anton Watson as a guy who can, spend some time on the floor and give you some help from a big standpoint. That's their biggest, area of weakness, quite honestly, is they don't really have any depth there because, let's face it, we love Al as Celtics fans, but, the shelf life is,
Yeah.
we're maybe at a 10 minutes a game kind of place. We're not getting, if we get into the playoffs and Porzingis is out, we're not getting 28 to 30 minutes from Al next year. Like we're losing.
No.
So I think finding some strength there. I would have loved Philip Bukowski from Duke.
But he married, his girlfriend's too old and groomed him, so people were afraid of him.
That is a crazy story.
It is.
So yeah, 76. My second team would have been OKC, as you mentioned, because I feel like they were very, very close, and adding like a big dude who can, help them defend. They're not going to get eaten up as badly by, teams that have a really big guy like a Denver or somebody like that.
Yeah.
They can kind of keep him at least under wraps. You keep Jokic at 30 points. They have the defenders that can kind of like keep Murray in check and some of those other guys. So I feel like Adden Hartenstein is probably my would have me put OKC as a second.
Yeah, and they added Caruso, and then like we talked about teams that could.
How did I forget about that?
Yeah.
We were talking. That is a great ad.
And then you talk about a team with a war chest. They can pretty much anybody that is available. They have more picks to offer, and they've got a couple young players they could throw in there too. So Oklahoma City is also in that. They won the West last year. You add Hartenstein, you add Caruso, you only lose Giddey, which I think is Caruso and Hartenstein more than make up for. And then if anybody is available, and they need anybody, they want anybody. They've got I know Sam Presti is like me in our fantasy league. I just like collecting picks and young players, but. He could push them all in and go for a big name,
Well, I'll throw a hypothetical at you guys. What if, like you're saying, they have their defender now in Caruso. So maybe they feel like they don't need Dort. And what if they want to unload Dort for Markkanen? And you're looking at adding another secondary true scorer next to Gilgeous Alexander and Jalen Williams as your third scorer.
Yeah, that's nasty.
That's the best team in the West.
Dude, plus you're big.
Yeah.
That would be huge. Now, I don't know if Utah's going for that, but to Jay's point, like, obviously we know that Utah doesn't, they'll have no problem if you say, hey, listen, we'll give you 5 picks, such as like the Rudy Gobert thing. But yeah, I think that, what you guys are talking about makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, I think, hate to stay in the West here, but a team that I'm excited about, honestly, to watch is Houston.
Okay.
And they haven't necessarily done anything crazy yet this offseason, but I just love their past offseason. As much as Ime Udoka had an interesting exit with the Celtics, you still can't overlook what he did in this short time.
Yeah,
with
he's
them
a
in
really
terms of
good
building
coach.
a culture and a really good team, and how quickly he's turned the Rockets around. They were a joke 2 years ago, and they have probably one of the most exciting young. Like, I think if you were a new GM and you were just to pick any of these rosters as to who to hop on, obviously OKC is going to be right up there. Some of these other teams, Celtics, but they're not far down that list. I think that it's going to be about either Şengün or Jalen Green stepping up as a real number one option. They're missing that number one guy right now. But I love Jabari Smith. I love Şengün. Jalen Green scares me a little bit sometimes with the shot selection and maybe, maturity. But he's a guy that can get a bucket whenever you need. We've always, us Warrens have always loved Van Vliet as an undrafted guy. They have a good team.
Yeah.
And I think Whitmore is the type of guy that can come off the bench. Eason can go down that roster. Steven Adams is on that roster. I think they have a deep team. I wouldn't be shocked to see them end up as like a 5 seed in the West.
Jay, you got to have like a place in your heart for Steven Adams, right? Like, I mean, you guys kind of have like, I could mix the two of you guys up.
Yeah, I can see. I've been told that before. Yeah. No, I love Steven Adams. I mean, yeah. I mean, the other teams I was thinking of, like my wild card teams, are like New Orleans, if Zion is healthy, which is pretty much, the giant, elephant in the room. And then the one very sad team that I don't even know how you discuss them is the Bulls. I figured they were too dark of a team to bring up in the bad news section. They can't give away Levine with a first round pick added. They asked for Wiggins, Chris Paul, and they were offering a first round pick in Levine, and the Warriors were like, nah, we'll cut Chris Paul instead. That's where they're at.
Wow.
And nobody wants Vucevic, nobody wants Ball, nobody wants Levine. Like, I don't know what that team does. But I figured we had to, we couldn't go, that was just too dark to do in the very beginning.
They're certainly in a tough spot, and I think part of it is just flat out unlucky. No, I think some people argue just a poor decision in the first place, signing Lonzo. But when he was healthy for that week, they were really good.
He was really
they were
good,
one of the
yeah.
best defensive teams. I mean, they lost Caruso now, but him and Caruso, it's a backcourt. You're not
Nasty.
getting by those guys. I loved him in high school and college. I thought he was going to be amazing, but the injuries had to be the shoes were it for him. But I don't know what you do with Levine. I think your only option right now is to keep him, hope that he plays well with a not horrible cast around him, and then you trade him for a team that's desperate. But I don't know what you do with him.
Like I said, if you're offering him and a first round pick and teams don't want him, I just think people are terrified because he's got 3 years left on that deal, and that last year is over $50 million, and his knee apparently is pretty terrifying to most basketball doctors. So I think you'd have a hard time trading him, unless you get if Utah gives away if they trade away Marketing for picks and they just absorb them into the cap for the next couple of years because it's all going to be all young guys and they just take the whatever asset you give them with it. I think that's like their only hope at this point.
And the fact that they haven't found a way to ship him to Detroit yet is very telling because they'll take anybody. Yeah.
And Detroit signed Tobias Harris, which seems like a perfect Detroit signing.
50 million, 58 million. What was it? It was crazy. I think probably one of these signings, just to kind of finish this up, and I don't think this puts them in the good or the bad category, but I do think that the signing that's actually going to have ripple effects for many, many years is the Chris Paul signing in San Antonio. Him getting a year with Wemby and with Castle, I think, is going to have a huge positive impact on the growth of those two players.
Agreed.
Something that San Antonio is going to appreciate for a long, long time.
Yeah, I love that signing for them because, like, again, Chris Paul could have gone and tried to chase a ring and be, 7th, 8th man on somebody, but going to play with Wemby and Coach Pop and like you said, Castle and some of those other young guys. Like that could be a really positive situation. And if he turns out to be dickhead Chris Paul that everybody hates, he's only $11 million and they can just cut him.
Right.
Because he is he rubs people the wrong way from time to time. They see Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, all those sort of people. Back from Lob City Clippers.
Could you guys see the Spurs being a team similar to the team that he had with OKC? However many years back. Now they're better. They didn't have a Wemby, but he totally just willed that team to the playoffs, and then they made a little run. I could see the Spurs making a run.
I think Wemby is the most.
It's going to be a great locker room.
Wemby is one of the most incredible sports creatures I've ever seen. So, nothing that person does if he stays healthy would shock me.
Yeah, I mean, and I think I mentioned it last week that Keaton and I had the chance to go to the Summer League last year and catching. We didn't catch the first game with Wemby, which was okay because it wasn't a great game. But the second game, even just in the warm-ups, but specifically in the game, there was a couple of times where he just did stuff where you're like, that doesn't even look humanly possible with someone that large, right?
No.
So him to
And he's a dog.
agile as he is, and like being able to do the things that he did, like there's nothing that you can't put past that kid, and he's just gonna get better and better and better.
He's got an attitude. He plays nasty. They showed it like when Castle was drafted, Wemby was the one that called him and was like, so excited to get you. Like, I mean, he's got all the, now you just worry that people are going to roll through his legs and they're going to snap in like twigs is the only thing you worry about with him.
Right.
Because, I mean, to have his attitude, his IQ, and his just freakish size and athleticism is just unreal.
Well, and Jay, right on. The other thing adding to that is just his drive to be great, win a championship. I feel like all of these guys, or not all of these guys, but so many of these guys that come in, a lot of them tending to be foreign guys that are these quote-unquote unicorns, they don't necessarily have that drive. I think that was a dig with Porzingis when he came in.
Yeah,
he had all this talent, but he doesn't really look like he wants to win. That's what made Giannis different, and it's proven to work for him. And I could see, you could totally see it working long term. For Wemby, it's just going to be a question of health.
Yeah, without a doubt. Do we want to talk any other post-draft thoughts, Fred?
Yeah, I'm curious what you guys think. Like, I have this notion just with, now that we've got a couple of days of free agency under our belts, we're starting to see some of these insane numbers that dudes are getting for contracts. And again, I don't mean to pick on the guy. Like Hartenstein getting what, 88 million, 89 million?
Yeah.
For 3 years. I just feel like we're getting to a point where the NBA where you're going to have almost like the rich and the poor, because teams are going to there's this push to just add guys and pay them insane amounts of money. But then you have to fill out your roster and you have no money, or you don't want to go over the cap because it's so the penalties for going over the cap just have gotten so, or will be as of next year, so insane.
Yeah, the apron.
So you're going to have to just if you don't draft great, then you're going to be offering guys a guy who might have been like a sixth man for somebody. Most you're going to be all offer him is like $6 million a year, right? And so you're going to have half of your roster be these guys who are like bargain basement dudes, and you got the other half of your roster, which is guys who are just you could make the argument grossly overpaid. Some of them won't be, but a lot of them will be, right? I'm just worried that it's going to be a really weird place and a tough place for the NBA to kind of keep things together, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I saw some people. I mean, obviously the Clippers are worried about the apron, because if you end up on the apron for 3 years in a row, you can't do anything. They lock your picks away. They basically you're on timeout from the NBA. So they're trying to keep you from doing too bad of stuff to yourself. But I think with the new TV deals from Amazon and Apple and whoever else is going to be involved, and then I think we're going to see an influx of of Asian talent from China and some other places that are really going to keep the league, doing what they've got to do. There'll be a couple teams I think, like the Wizards are just a poorly run, but I also feel like, and I'll give him credit. Bill Simmons would used to do the terrible GM draft in his column way back in the day, and he stopped doing it because he's like, there's too many smart analytic guys and too many smart number guys in the league now that just don't let that happen anymore. So I think 90% of the teams will figure it out, and then there'll be 2 or 3 stupid teams that'll need weird clauses to fix themselves, probably. Maybe like another amnesty or something along those lines.
Oh yeah, always there will always be a couple stupid teams, but I think it's totally an expansion play.
Yeah.
It's certainly like we're saying. It's just you're not going to be able to pay guys. It's going to be about really making sure the guy you're paying or the guys you're paying are good players to build your team around if you want to be competitive, and it's going to spread out stars, which is good because we're adding 2 more teams, at least in the next however many years. But I think it's intriguing. I love the idea of forcing teams to kind of build through the draft a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Love seeing the C's be successful with it. For the most part, obviously, you're always going to have a couple guys in free agency, but your core guys being built through the draft is awesome. It's going to encourage that, but it'll be interesting to see how long it takes teams to get used to that. Yeah.
Do you guys think that there's any way that, so you're talking about like the draft and building around the draft? I agree, like that's going to be essential, like making good picks and guys that you can add. It just thinks that salary cap piece in terms of like going up against the penalties and stuff, that there should be some kind of like formula to reduce the cap hit if they're dudes that you drafted.
I've said that for the NFL forever. Like, I've always wanted, like, for every year of service you have with the team that drafted you, it should be like 10. You still have to pay them, obviously, but it's 10% that doesn't count towards your cap, or 3% every year, and just up to a certain cap on that. Maybe it's like 12%, whatever it is. But just a way to, like you said, reward you for being a smart team.
Exactly, because you're getting penalized. So again, like let's say the Celtics 2 draft picks are great, and in 4 years they're coming up for a big contract. There's no chance that the Celtics are going to be able to keep them unless they trade away some of the guys that they already have, right? Whereas like Brown and Tatum, those guys have max contracts. Those contracts shouldn't be as preventative from them being able to hold on to some of the other guys. So yeah, I agree with you. I think it would work in the NFL the same way. Like, you see way too many dudes who, once the 4 years of the rookie contract are up, that they're like off going someplace else, getting 3 times the money. So yeah, I think that leagues with the salary cap do need to try to figure out some way to get that in there, because that's only going to promote this whole notion of building a dynasty. And
Yeah. Now, from a societal, political standpoint, I don't think we should have these mega billionaire millionaires. But if everybody was Ishbia, that would be the kind of thing that they would probably vote for, what you're talking about. But because I think, the Celtics are currently up for sale. And you have all these groups that are buying teams, and they're buying them sort of like regular businesses and for profit, not for glory, which is the way franchises should be bought, for rich ego. That they would all vote that down. But like I said, if it was all Ishbias, I think that would happen. I think that should mean, as long as we're going to have the uber rich, those should be the only people that are allowed to own teams. Giant rich people with tiny penises and giant egos, I think, is the key. And that, yeah.
I mean, you're right on. I mean, Ishbia is awesome because his whole thing coming in was he just wanted to make it easier for his fans to watch the games. He was all like, let me stream all of these games for free to people. I think it was just in the local, who would have that team as their local team, but still, that's all you want to hear from an owner. Think about how many owners do not have the backing of their fans, and that's an easy way to come in and win.
Well, he has the money to do whatever he doesn't have to worry about money, and he has all that money. And he doesn't have anybody else to answer to. So it's a very, you have different kind of owners. Like in baseball, you have the terrible pirate owners that are just super cheap. And I think you get a few less of those in the NBA, but you still get, the groups and the multiple owners. I don't think really would ever go for that kind of thing, because they're not, like I said, I think you need it to be all giant ego people that just want to win. and are, obviously they want to make money, but they need to. It's got to be their desire to win. Has got to be the driving factor.
1,000%. And I think any winning team talks about that, where it's all the way down from the owner. Exactly what we're saying, where it's all the way from the owner to the last guy on the bench. If anybody's focus is anything other than win,
Yeah,
gonna hurt you.
it is. Oh, this is a special shout out to Bobby Bonilla, who was with the Pirates when I was a child. He just got his $1.3 million salary that he continues to get through 2028 due to a contract he signed in baseball. Every time I see that pop every year, it just blows my mind.
Yeah, what is it, like 20 years he's getting that?
Yeah, he has like 4 more years of $1.3 million a year.
It's so crazy. It's so crazy. Hey, from an NBA standpoint, just kind of thinking draft-wise, curious who you think, did the best in the draft. My mind is on Minnesota. I love Minnesota's first 2 picks, and I think that they're really great adds to their team. But was there anything that stood out to you guys in terms of draft-wise that you were like, hey, this is a great pick or great additions?
Like, I like Minnesota, and I brought their number 8 overall pick, Dillinger. I mean, I brought him up as one of the guys I really like, but it's easy to see why you wouldn't like him if you're a GM, right? A 6'2" guy with a 6'3" wingspan who weighs 170 pounds. Now, I think in the right situation, yeah, he could be really good. But I mean, I think this draft was so hard to really, figure out talent. Along those same lines, I liked what San Antonio did. I think you got a 6'6" guard with legitimate skills, and you know where he's at, coming from winning program, and you did get 2 first-round picks out of your 8th pick that can be used for maybe not this year, but when you're trying to build around Wemby, that's 2 more picks to throw out there in a trade to bring in another whatever you would bring next to Wemby. So I liked what they did.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I would say, weirdly enough, I actually liked what the Lakers did with their first-round pick.
Okay.
And it's not really that they did anything. It's more just taking Connect. I think it was really interesting to see this year there was a pretty clearly a high emphasis on taking teenagers and just prospects and projects and potential, because it was interesting to see teams like Milwaukee, who we talked about earlier, take A.J. Johnson, who's a teenager playing overseas, and I think he's a great prospect. I like what I've seen from him, but he just doesn't fit that team as a guy who's going to come in now and help that team. I think Connect is a guy who's going to come in, and he's not going to be a starter right away or anything. I don't even know if he ever will be, but he's certainly a guy that can come in and help that team, especially a team that has so much pressure on them year in, year out. And you have to find a way to stay competitive. They might not add a big guy, a big superstar, even though LeBron's supposedly going to take a pay cut. But if they don't add a guy, you could see a guy like Connect stepping in, guy coming off the bench you can run a couple plays for. Guy gets hot, knocks down some shots, and he's the type of guy that can keep you in games, get you back in games, or win games. So I like that ad. And then I think the Bronny thing, in my opinion, has been a little bit overblown. I like him as a prospect. I don't know about this year, but to be completely honest, he's not getting drafted if his dad isn't LeBron. I mean, that's not a hot take to say. He came off the bench and didn't average great numbers on a pretty poor college team. So
yeah,
I think we see what we get out of him. But cool story.
Yeah, I feel really bad for Bronny, right? I was talking to you guys earlier about the fact, the scrutiny that kid is under. There's nothing he can do, and I don't know if it's because LeBron's got his haters, and there's a lot of people who are just wanting to go back and forth and argue whether or not he's a great player or not. Arguably one of the best 2 players to ever play the game. Whether you want to argue that or not, I don't know. I don't have anything against LeBron, but I don't know if it's just that kind of vitriol that's spilling over into putting this kid in the spotlight, and he could be a 6th man on any team, and it's still
potentially
not gonna be good enough. Even though that would be an incredible success for any second round pick, right?
Right.
And then you look at like Jerry Rice's kid got drafted in the NFL. Like most people don't even know that because that kid's like getting the chance to like just go through and learn. And I mean, I think he was fourth round.
Yeah,
Maybe
he was going to get drafted. Yeah, he wasn't. Yeah. LeBron
Yeah.
didn't help him either. Like, I know he deleted the tweet, but when he was like, Bronny could be started for any one of these scrubs teams this year, like, talking shit about NBA players while talking about how your son could be starting when he's averaging 4 points a game for USC coming off the bench. Like, he deleted the tweet, and he's a proud dad, and you kind of got to love the proud dad moments, but LeBron has not helped his Bronny. And then, when Rich Paul is telling other teams, like, don't draft him, he's never going to play, like, you can't do this, he's going to play, like, it felt very orchestrated, whereas, the other sibling kids just sort of, like the Antipakupos that just sort of end up with their brother feels less like, there wasn't all this. It wasn't, he wasn't, talking trash about the rest of the league saying that his brother could, whoop them all one-on-one. And then it wasn't, and again, part of that is, the 24-hour sports cycle and everything else. But yeah.
I agree with you. I think, it's another example of adults screwing things up for kids because, Paul, telling teams that he was going to go play in Australia if you draft him, like, BS move. Like, that can't be happening. And, I agree with you. Like, LeBron, hasn't made things any easier for his son. And I even heard an interview with Bronny where he was like, the person asked him, like, how is it, like, being LeBron's son? He's like, it's tough.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I appreciate him being honest about it, and it's totally true. As much as his father has paved the way for him to a certain extent, it's also, at the same time, like a double-edged sword, right? So.
Well, and that's what takes away from it, is what they did ahead of it. And Jay's right on that. LeBron didn't help his son's cause, tweeting that out. But then, however long after, being like, he sent out that tweet. It was like, why can't kids just be kids or something like that?
Yeah.
Like, just let a kid be. And it's like, buddy, you're the one who brought all this to him. So it'll just be, And then Rich Paul saying, we could have told the team to draft him at 17 if they wanted. Just seems a little bit too, takes away from a kid getting to play with his father.
Right, and so that's why, like, historically, like, I'll just, like, say horrible things about you, even to other people, just so that way it doesn't get...
It's very nice, yeah. It's a good lesson for all you fathers out there. I'm just kidding.
That's right.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the good thing for him is obviously, like, I think he's, in this weird cycle where things happen like 90 miles an hour. Like, he already had the overhype, the backlash, and now he's already back to, I think, being given more of a leeway because of the backlash. Like, it's already cycled through at that insane rate to the point where I think he can go in and be the 13th man on the team and just play hard in practice, and people are going to like him. I don't think we're going to see him, but...
In his defense, I mean, as hard as it is to make a name for himself, and again, I don't know how much LeBron himself played a role in it, but the kid was still an awesome high school player. He was still a McDonald's All-American, his top kid in his class. Wasn't very good at USC, but the kid had suffered cardiac arrest. I mean, within the year. So any expectations for that for last season kind of should have been thrown out the window. So there's a path for him to, like, be an NBA player. It's just really hard to see it being on the Lakers because he's always going to be under that scrutiny.
And he's 6'1".
We'll see.
And he's not a point guard.
So the one thing he has going for him is he's could be a really good shooter. I guess in the combine he was lights out.
Yeah.
But it's the combine. We've heard that before.
It's very true. We haven't done our normal Sutton family tradition of what have you been watching? Any non-sports that you're excited about? I put you guys on the spot, so how about...
It kind of ties into sports, like Wrexham. I would still highly recommend that if you haven't watched that. But, and maybe I'm a sap. There's a couple of, like, the baking shows that I, like, find fascinating, mainly because it's the ones where they're making stuff that I feel like, man, I could make that,
Okay.
and I could probably do it better than that. That's heartwarming. Sorry.
It's a nice
No,
ego
that's
boost.
cool.
Yeah. I would say my one sports related show is do you guys ever watch Letterkenny? The Canadian show on Hulu?
Um,
I love Letterkenny, but they have a character on there named Shoresy who's a Canadian hockey player, and this is the third season of Shoresy just came out, and it's fantastic. It's really the action on the ice is really good. Like everybody can actually play that's on that show. Um, I will say Letterkenny and then Shoresy is a Canadian show that has its very own. It's got a very unique cadence to the show, so I think it's been jarring for some people to turn it on. I mean, that's thick Canadian, French Canadian accents from time to time, and then the way the show is written and the way the dialogue is delivered is very unique. I'll just say, but I've enjoyed it quite a bit.
yeah, for me, um, I won't go into too much because it's a very popular show, but I'm very excited for the third season of The Bear.
Okay.
We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Came out the other day, right?
Yeah, it just came out. I haven't started it yet, but excited.
Yeah. I mean, people seem to love it, so.
It's way too stressful for me.
Yeah, that's what I
can't
found.
watch it.
Yeah.
It's too stressful.
I was like, it reminds me of having to work in restaurants all those years. I was like, I don't really want to do this again.
Right.
I completely understand anybody who has worked in the restaurant business not liking it or not wanting to watch it.
Yeah, it's not that I don't. It's not like I don't think it. Like where some people are like, well, it's not. I think it's very authentic. Like, it's almost too authentic to the point where I'm like, oh, this is just like going back to work. I don't like this. It was the same like a show that the last show I mentioned. Like, I went back and watched Abbott Elementary season 3, which as someone that has taught in the public school system, it's both a heartwarming, really funny show, but it's also incredibly accurate. And when I was teaching, I found that show hard to watch, as opposed to it being like a nice, relatable thing. It was more just like all their frustrations were just. It was like I have these at work. I can't do this, even though that's like a legitimate sitcom. It was still like, no, this is just too close to home. I can't do this.
Yeah. The couple of episodes I watched were hysterical, and that's always telling. Like when you watch a sitcom and you can watch an episode here and an episode there, and it's funny, then you know that's really good because most of the time those sitcoms just get funnier and funnier because you get more into the characters and you learn stuff. So I can see that being a really good show.
And then our normal other thing, because my dad obviously loves food. And I didn't have a food moment for a while, but I had one this week. We went to Trader Joe's, and I got these flour lemon cookies, and they're just incredible. They're like two like lemon flowers, like they're like a very soft like shortbread, but very lemony, and then with lemon curd in the middle. And I ate most of the box myself, and I loved them. So that was my
Well, I'm
food
going to
moment.
tell you first, I could make that. Second, have you ever tried one of their Kringles? And I'm going to steal this from Keaton because Keaton's the one who introduced me to these things. At Trader Joe's, the pastry, like the one we have up here, they have this one little like shelf with pastry items.
Yeah, that's where the cookies were.
Wow, you'll see this big line. It's probably about 14 inches by 14 inches,
Oh wow.
big rectangle. If you see that thing there, you have got to get there before anyone else in the place does, because once they're found out, they go like a flash.
Gone.
They're incredible.
The Kringle?
Yeah,
Kringle,
yeah,
yeah.
they're just made in this bakery in Wisconsin, I think.
Yeah.
They're fantastic. Highly recommend.
Okay. I'll have to look for it when I go back, look for more lemon cookies in that same section.
Yeah. No, Matt, and those cookies smell us.
Keaton, any food moments? Or are you just rolling with the Kringle?
I honestly was going to say the Kringle, but that got taken from me. I will actually, I'm going to give a shout out to, I work in East Long Meadow, Massachusetts, and there's a mom and pop, or it's just a woman who runs a bakery called Sweet Boutique.
Okay.
That my girlfriend and I have been going to very frequently, and it is unbelievable. Everything is homemade, fresh in the morning. They just do coffees and like energy drinks, and then pastries, and it's more dessert type pastries. but they come up with cool ideas. They have these things called deep dish cookies, where it's all different based on the year or based on the time of year. They have different themes. Yeah, and like so in Easter was my favorite one. They had like one that was specifically Cadbury egg.
Oh, I love the Cadbury egg.
Oh, they're incredible. They're incredible. So I just want to give a shout out to Sweet Boutique. East Long Meadow. They're fantastic too.
No, that's perfect. That's exactly the kind of food one we like for people that, if you're listening and you're in that area, then you go check that out. I've been pretty poor not getting out in New Orleans lately. So, because Trader Joe's feels like a lame one. But
I guess
They were just
one
so
last one that I got to add. They did a thing up here recently with like local farms that like make their own ice cream.
oh yeah.
We have a few of them, and some of them are really, really good. But they all got together and they did this thing called the Dairy Crawl. So they made out cards. If you went to each one, you got your card stamped, and then like once you got to all 6, then you could submit your card to like win a gift card or everything like that. But to have an excuse to go have ice cream at all these different places was the best thing on the face of the planet.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, I think that'll do it for this week. We'll be back next week with topics about sports. That's as specific as I'll get. All right, thank you all for coming. We'll talk to you next week.